Snow fell like fractured glass across the city, and Clara Evans' fingers trembled so violently she nearly dropped her phone. The screen glowed against the darkness, a single message typed but unsent. "Can you take us in tonight? Please, it's freezing." She meant to send it to her friend Sophie, but her shaking thumb hit the wrong contact. The name that blinked at the top of the screen made her breath catch. Ethan Cole. She froze, staring at it as the wind tore through the park and the twins stirred beside her on the bench. She hadn't seen that name in 6 years, not since the night she vanished from his life with nothing but a secret and 2 beating hearts. Before she could delete the message, her phone buzzed. Ethan. "Clara!" "Ethan, where are you?" Panic clawed at her chest. She turned the screen off, clutching the phone like it could burn her. But only moments later, headlights cut through the snowstorm. A sleek black SUV rolled to a stop at the curb. He stepped out. Ethan Cole, the man she once loved, the father her children would never know, stood before her in the snow. His dark coat was dusted white, his expression somewhere between disbelief and heartbreak. "Clara!" His voice cracked against the wind. "What the hell are you doing out here?" She couldn't answer. Her throat closed as the twins shifted beneath the worn blanket, their small bodies huddled for warmth. When Ethan's gaze fell on them, something in him broke. "They're yours?" he asked, his voice rough. She nodded once. "Ours," she whispered. The word hung in the air, fragile and final. He didn't ask questions after that. Not yet. He simply lifted one child into his arms, motioned for Clara to follow, and opened the back door of the SUV. The warmth inside was almost unbearable after the cold. The twins stirred but didn't wake, their cheeks flushed from frostbite. Clara sat stiffly beside them, the hum of the heater filling the silence. Ethan glanced at her only once through the rearview mirror, his jaw tight. "You should have called me," he said. "You wouldn't have answered," she murmured, his hands clenched on the wheel. "Try me." The drive to his penthouse felt endless. The city blurred past. Neon lights, slush, people hurrying home to warmth she hadn't known in years. When they reached the building, a valet rushed forward, his eyes widening as he saw the scene. Ethan ignored him, carrying one of the twins inside while Clara held the other. The elevator ride was silent, save for the soft hum of machinery and the steady heartbeat Clara could hear in her own chest. When the doors opened, she stepped into another world. The penthouse stretched before her like a memory she'd forgotten how to dream. Marble floors, glass walls overlooking the city, the faint scent of cedar and whiskey. Everything about it screamed Ethan, precise, cold, controlled. He guided her to the couch, helping her lay the twins down. Then for the first time, he looked at her fully. "You disappeared," he said quietly. "No calls, no letters. Just gone." She wrapped her arms around herself. It was safer that way. For who? Her eyes flicked toward the twins. For them. Ethan's expression hardened, but pain flickered beneath it. "They're mine, aren't they?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. He walked to the window, staring out at the snow-swept skyline. 6 years, Clara. I thought you were dead." "I might as well have been," she said softly. He turned back to her. "Tell me why. Tell me what happened." Clara looked down at her hands, her fingers still numb from the cold. "It's not that simple." "It never is with you," he said, but the bite in his tone was gone. It was weary, like a man who had built a life out of walls only to find them crumbling in one night. Clara stood, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Ethan, thank you for bringing us here, but we'll go in the morning. I just needed a place to stay," he finished for her. "You think I'm letting you walk out into that cold again?" She hesitated. "I can't take anything from you. Not anymore." He stepped closer, the distance between them charged. "This isn't charity, it's responsibility." Clara met his gaze, and for a moment, the years fell away. The laughter, the late nights, the promises whispered under city lights. Then she blinked, and they were strangers again. "You don't owe us anything," she said. He shook his head. "You're wrong. I owe you everything I never got the chance to give." The twins stirred then, murmuring softly. Clara turned toward them instinctively, kneeling by the couch to adjust the blanket. Ethan watched her, his heart twisting at the sight. the same tenderness that had once made him believe in forever. When she looked up again, her eyes met his. "They don't know," she said quietly. "About you." He swallowed hard. "Then we'll start with the truth." Clara's lips trembled. "You think truth fixes anything?" "It's all I have left," he said. Outside, the city glittered beneath the falling snow. Inside, two people who had once shared a life now stood on the edge of something fragile. An unspoken promise, a reckoning 6 years in the making. And as the twins breathed softly between them, Ethan realized this wasn't the night he got answers. It was the night everything began again. Morning came soft and gray, brushing pale light across the floor-to-ceiling windows of Ethan Cole's penthouse. Clara awoke to silence, the kind that felt heavy, deliberate, and suffocating. The twins were still asleep on the couch, their small faces turned toward each other, the blanket rising and falling with their breaths. For a moment she let herself look at them, peaceful, warm, safe, the opposite of everything she had been able to give them these past few years. Then she heard the quiet clink of glass. Ethan stood by the kitchen counter, dressed sharply even at dawn, his sleeves rolled up as he poured steaming coffee into 2 mugs. He turned when she stepped into the light. "You should have woken me," she said softly. "You look like you hadn't slept in years," he replied. She hesitated, unsure how to respond. His voice was calm, but the air between them wasn't. It vibrated with everything unsaid. Ethan handed her a cup. "It's decaf. I remember you hated the strong stuff." The smallest flicker of surprise crossed her face. "You remember that?" "I remember a lot," he said. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the city outside disappeared. Then Clara broke the silence. "We'll leave after breakfast. The kids need rest, but we can find a shelter near Cambridge." Ethan's jaw tightened. "You're not taking them back out there." "It's not your choice," she said. "It is when they're mine." The words hit like a hammer. Clara's grip tightened on the mug. "You don't get to say that. You weren't there." Ethan took a slow breath. "Because you didn't give me the chance." She turned away, staring out the window at the snow. "You think I wanted this? That I wanted to raise them alone? You have no idea what I went through." "Then tell me," he said quietly. "Tell me why you disappeared." She opened her mouth, but the words caught in her throat. The truth was tangled, painful, shameful, and too dangerous to drag into daylight. "Not now," she whispered. Ethan's expression softened. "Then when?" "When it's safe," she said. He frowned. "Safe from what?" But Clara only shook her head. "You wouldn't believe me." The twins woke to the smell of pancakes. Clara's heart twisted at the sight of Ethan in the kitchen, sleeves still rolled up, flipping pancakes like it was the most natural thing in the world. The twins sat at the counter, wide-eyed. Liam grinned. "Are you a chef?" Ethan laughed, a real laugh this time, low and warm. "Not quite, just practiced." Emma, the quieter twin, tilted her head. "You talk fancy. Are you rich?" Clara froze. Ethan's smile faltered. He crouched beside them. "Something like that," he said. "But it's not important." "Mom says money doesn't make you kind," Emma said. Ethan's throat tightened. "She's right." Clara looked away, pretending to busy herself with dishes. But when she glanced back, Ethan was watching the twins with a look that could only be described as awe. The resemblance was unmistakable now. The same dark hair, the same almond-shaped eyes. And when Liam laughed, it was Ethan's laugh. After breakfast, the twins built blanket forts in the corner of the living room, while Ethan pulled Clara aside. "They need a doctor," he said. "Their cheeks are red, and that cough." "It's just the cold," Clara said quickly. "It's more than that," he countered. "They were out there for who knows how long. I already called someone. My doctor's on the way." "You did what?" "Relax," Ethan said. "He's discreet." Clara's face went pale. "You shouldn't have done that." "Clara, they're sick." "You don't understand," she hissed. "Every time someone finds out where we are, something happens. Someone shows up." Ethan frowned. "Who?" Her eyes flicked toward the door. "It doesn't matter." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "If someone's threatening you, I need to know." Clara swallowed hard. "You can't help with this. Please, just trust me." He hesitated, reading the fear in her eyes. the kind that couldn't be faked. Slowly he nodded. All right, but if I'm going to protect them, I need the truth. I didn't ask for your protection, she said. You didn't have to, he replied. When the doctor arrived, the twins were tucked under blankets, rosy-cheeked but smiling. He examined them briefly, then turned to Ethan. A touch of bronchitis, nothing serious. Keep them warm, fluids, light antibiotics. Clara exhaled in relief, though her hands were still trembling. Ethan thanked the doctor and walked him out. When he returned, he found her by the window, staring out at the snow. You can relax, he said. They'll be fine. Her voice was small. You shouldn't have seen them like this. Ethan frowned. Like what? Vulnerable, she said. It's not who we were. He stepped closer. It's who we are now. And maybe that's okay. She turned toward him, tears glinting in her eyes. You think this changes anything? Doesn't it? He asked. She didn't answer, but the silence that followed wasn't denial. It was fear. He reached for her hand, but she pulled back. I can't stay, she whispered. Not here. Not with you. Clara, every time we get close, something breaks. I won't let the twins grow up in that kind of storm. Ethan's voice was steady, but his eyes were pleading. Then let me prove to you that the storm's over. She looked at him for a long moment, torn between memory and survival. Then she said softly, Storms don't end, Ethan. They just find new skies. And with that, she walked back to her children, leaving him standing alone in the quiet hum of the penthouse, wondering what kind of danger could make a woman love him and still run. Ethan couldn't focus on anything that day. The skyline outside his office shimmered with winter sunlight, but his mind kept circling back to the image of Clara at the window, her face drawn and wary, her hands trembling as she'd spoken of storms and danger. He'd seen fear before, in boardrooms, in negotiations, but not like that. This was something deeper, older. It wasn't the fear of losing money or power. It was the fear of losing everything that mattered. And that, he realized, made him angrier than he had been in years. He picked up his phone. Marissa, he said when his assistant answered, I need you to dig into something, quietly. Define something, she replied dryly. Clara Evans, he said. I want to know where she's been the last 6 years. No publicity, no records trail. Use personal channels only. There was a pause. You think she's hiding something? I know she's hiding something, he said. I just don't know what or who from. Back at the penthouse, Clara stood by the window again, watching snowflakes swirl over the city. She hated this view. It was too beautiful, too safe. It made her remember a time when she'd believed life could stay that way. The twins were playing quietly with the toy cars Ethan had bought that morning. Their laughter was soft, innocent, and yet every sound made her heart tighten. The warmth they had now was temporary. She couldn't forget that. Her phone buzzed. A text. Unknown number. You shouldn't have come back. Her blood ran cold. She deleted it instantly, but her hands shook as she slid the phone into her pocket. For 6 years, she'd lived like this, looking over her shoulder, never staying too long in one place. She'd thought moving across states, changing names would be enough, but it never was. She turned sharply as Ethan entered the room. Everything okay? He asked. Fine, she said too quickly. He raised an eyebrow. You don't look fine. I'm just tired. He studied her for a long moment. You've said that every day since you got here. Clara folded her arms. Because it's true. Ethan sighed and took a step closer. You're not the same woman I remember. She looked up sharply. You remember the woman you wanted me to be, Ethan, not the one I became. That silenced him. She turned back toward the window, her reflection framed against the city lights. He wanted to ask her what had happened, why she'd vanished, why she'd been living on a park bench with his children. But something in her posture, a quiet, brittle strength, made him stop. Pushing her now would only drive her further away. Still, he couldn't let it go. Clara, he said softly, whatever you're running from, I can help. She didn't turn around. No, you can't. Why not? Because the person I'm running from doesn't fear you, she whispered. He fears what you could expose. Ethan's breath caught. Who? Before she could answer, Emma called from the hallway. Mommy, Liam's coughing again. Clara rushed out, relief and fear warring in her chest. Ethan followed, his mind spinning. He fears what you could expose. That wasn't the language of a jealous ex or a random threat. That was the language of power. Someone with something to lose. That night, Ethan sat alone in his study, scrolling through financial reports that no longer made sense. Every number blurred into another. His mind was still back in the living room. The look on Clara's face when she'd read that text, the way her shoulders had tightened. The door creaked softly. "You're still awake," came her voice. He turned. She stood in the doorway in one of his old shirts, her hair loose, her expression conflicted. "Couldn't sleep," he said. "You either." She shook her head. "Liam's fever broke. I just wanted to say thank you for calling that doctor." He smiled faintly. "You don't have to thank me for caring about my own son." Her eyes softened. "You shouldn't say that." "Not yet." "Clara," he said, standing, "you can't keep pretending this isn't real. Look at them. They have my eyes." Her voice trembled. "I know." He took a step closer. "Then tell me why you ran. Who were you protecting them from?" She hesitated, torn between truth and fear. Then finally she whispered, "From someone who wanted to own everything, including you." Ethan frowned. "What does that mean?" But Clara only shook her head. "You'll understand soon enough." The next morning Marissa called. Her tone was urgent. "Ethan, I found something." He stepped into his office, lowering his voice. "Go ahead." "Clara's name doesn't exist in any official database after 2019, but I found hospital records under an alias, Eva Martin. She gave birth to twins in a private clinic, paid in cash." Ethan's stomach turned. "How?" "That's not all," Marissa continued. "The clinic was funded through a trust, the same trust your uncle Richard Cole uses for off-the-books transactions." Ethan froze. "My uncle?" "It looks like he covered her medical bills," Marissa said, "and then made sure she disappeared." Ethan's grip tightened around the phone. "Send me everything." "Ethan," she said carefully, "if this is true—" "It's true," he said, his voice like steel. "He took them from me. All of them." He hung up and looked toward the living room, where Clara was helping the twins pack their small bags, preparing to leave before she could be found again. Not this time. Ethan straightened, his jaw set. For 6 years he'd believed Clara left him because she'd stopped loving him. Now he knew she'd left because someone else had decided she should. And whoever that man was, Richard or not, he was about to find out what happened when you tried to take away the one thing Ethan Cole couldn't buy back: his family. Ethan barely remembered driving to the Cole Infrastructure headquarters. His thoughts were too loud, his pulse too fast. The truth, or what he suspected of it, echoed in his head like a drumbeat. Richard knew. Richard paid. Richard erased her. The elevator ride to the top floor felt endless. His reflection stared back from the mirrored walls, the same reflection that had once looked up to his uncle as a mentor, even a father figure. That trust now felt like a joke. When the doors opened, Richard's assistant blanched. "Mr. Cole, your uncle's in a meeting?" "Cancel it," Ethan said, his tone so sharp it cut the air in half. He didn't wait for permission. He strode down the hall, pushed open the office door, and stepped into the room. Richard looked up from his desk, calm as ever, a half-smile curling under his silver beard. "Ethan," he said smoothly, "to what do I owe the—" Ethan slammed a folder onto the table. "You paid Clara to disappear." The words landed like a thunderclap. For the first time, Richard's eyes flickered. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Ethan said. "You transferred funds through a private trust to a clinic 6 years ago. She gave birth there. Then she vanished. And you made sure I never found her." Richard leaned back in his chair, folding his hands. "You've been busy." "Don't dodge this," Ethan snapped. "Tell me why." Richard's tone didn't change. "Because you needed to stay focused. You were on the verge of securing the Cole-Cole merger. The media was circling you. The board was questioning your discipline. And that woman, her name is Clara," Ethan growled. Richard ignored the correction. "Was a liability. A single scandal, and everything you'd built would have collapsed. So yes, I ensured she left before she could destroy you." Ethan's voice dropped, low and cold. "You think destroying her life was protecting mine?" I think saving an empire sometimes requires sacrifice, Richard said. Ethan stared at him in disbelief. You took 6 years of my life. You took my children. Richard's calm cracked, just for a moment. I did what had to be done. You were too blinded by emotion to see what was at stake. And look at you now. You're a billionaire, a public figure, a man with everything. Would you really trade it all for a woman and two? He didn't finish, because Ethan's fist hit the desk so hard that pens rolled off the surface. Finish that sentence, he said quietly, and I swear you'll regret it. Richard's expression hardened. Careful, Ethan. Don't forget who built the foundation you're standing on. Ethan leaned forward, his voice steady and sharp. Then maybe it's time I tear it down. Back at the penthouse, Clara was packing. The twins were coloring on the floor, oblivious to the storm gathering around them. She folded their clothes methodically, hands trembling despite her efforts to stay composed. She didn't belong here. She never did. But when she turned toward the door, she froze. Ethan stood there, eyes dark and unreadable. You were right, he said quietly. It was him. Her breath caught. Who? My uncle, he said. Richard Cole. He paid you off. He orchestrated everything. Your disappearance. The clinic. The silence. Clara sank onto the edge of the couch, her legs suddenly weak. He promised me he'd ruin you if I stayed, she whispered. He said he'd make you lose everything. Your company, your investors, your name. I didn't believe him at first, but then people stopped calling me. My accounts froze. I couldn't rent an apartment under my name. He kept his promise. Ethan clenched his fists. You should have told me. I tried, she said, her voice cracking. He intercepted everything. My emails, my calls. I even sent a letter. Ethan shook his head, anger mixing with guilt. I thought you left because I wasn't enough. Clara's eyes softened. You were the only thing that ever was. For a long time, silence filled the space between them. Then Ethan said, He'll pay for this. You can't fight him, she said quickly. He's dangerous. You don't know what he's capable of. I do now, Ethan said, and I'm not afraid of him anymore. She grabbed his arm. Ethan, please. You don't understand. He has connections, leverage. He'll drag you down with him. He turned to her, determination burning in his eyes. Then we fall together. Later that evening, Ethan met with Marissa in a quiet cafe far from downtown. He won't go down easily, she warned. He's already trying to freeze your board access. He's framing this as a mental breakdown, claims you're emotionally compromised. Ethan gave a dry laugh. He's not entirely wrong. Marissa leaned forward. What's the plan? I want everything, Ethan said. Every transaction, every shell company, every dirty deal he's buried under coal infrastructure. I'll expose him myself. Marissa hesitated. And if that destroys the company? Then it destroys it, Ethan said. I built my empire once. I can build it again. But I'm not living another day knowing it was built on her suffering. Marissa studied him. And Clara? Ethan's expression softened. She and the kids stay hidden. I don't want Richard anywhere near them. Understood, Marissa said. But Ethan, if you go after him, you'll have no way back. He smiled faintly. Good. I don't want one. Back at the penthouse, Clara tucked the twins into bed. Snow fell thick and silent outside, painting the world in white. She lingered by the window, staring into the city lights, whispering to herself the words she hadn't been brave enough to say to him yet. Don't lose yourself again trying to save me. But deep down, she knew Ethan was already past that point. He wasn't fighting to save her anymore. He was fighting to take back the years they'd both lost, and to end the man who had stolen them. The storm outside was only getting worse. Wind howled against the penthouse windows, carrying with it the sharp hiss of winter snow. But inside, the air felt heavier for an entirely different reason. Clara stood by the fireplace, her hands wrapped around a mug she wasn't drinking, staring into the flames as if the answers she needed might flicker there. Behind her, Ethan was on the phone, his voice low, steady, and dangerous. Marissa, I don't care how deep he's buried it. Find everything. I want every offshore account, every subsidiary, every paper trail tied to coal infrastructure. A pause. Yes, even if it implicates me. Especially if it implicates me. He ended the call and set his phone down. The silence that followed was a living thing between them. Clara finally turned. "You're really doing this." Ethan met her gaze. "You thought I wouldn't." "I thought you'd be smarter," she said quietly. "Richard doesn't lose. He destroys." "I don't care." "Yes, you do," she said, stepping closer. "You care about your company, your reputation, your future. And this will take all of it." Ethan's expression hardened. "I've already lost 6 years of my life because of him. I can't lose anymore." Clara exhaled, her voice breaking. "And what about the twins, Ethan? What if he comes after them?" "He won't touch them," he said firmly. "You don't know that." He walked closer, stopping just short of her. "Then I'll make sure he can't." Their eyes locked, the firelight dancing between them. There was something frightening about his calm, like the quiet before an explosion. "Clara," he said softly, "I've spent my whole life fighting for things that didn't matter. This," he gestured to the room, to her, to the children sleeping down the hall. "This is the only thing that ever did." Her eyes shimmered. "And what happens when you destroy yourself trying to save it?" He smiled faintly. "Then at least I'll know it was for something real." By morning, he was gone. Clara found a note on the kitchen counter, written in Ethan's sharp, deliberate handwriting. "I need to end this before it reaches you. Stay with the twins. Trust no one but Marissa." She pressed the note to her chest, her heart pounding. She wanted to believe he'd come back, but she'd seen what revenge did to powerful men. It hollowed them out until there was nothing left but anger. Outside, the snow had stopped, leaving the city pale and still, but Clara's instincts screamed that the calm wouldn't last. She gathered the twins' coats. "We're leaving," she murmured. Emma blinked sleepily. "Where are we going, Mommy?" "Somewhere safe." Ethan arrived at the private office Richard used for unofficial business. He didn't bother knocking. The door slammed open, startling the two executives sitting across from Richard. "Out," Ethan ordered. They didn't hesitate. Richard didn't even look up from his papers. "You're becoming predictable, nephew." Ethan stepped forward, his tone controlled, but his eyes burning. "You used Clara as leverage. You hid my children from me. You think I won't make you pay for that?" Richard leaned back in his chair, amusement flickering across his face. "What exactly are you threatening me with? A scandal? A board vote? You forget who taught you how this game is played." "I didn't forget," Ethan said. "I learned from it." He dropped a flash drive on the desk. "That's everything I need to bury you. Financial crimes, bribery, falsified audits. It's over." Richard picked up the drive and twirled it between his fingers. "You think you're the first to try? I own the press, the lawyers, the shareholders. You'd be signing your own death warrant." "Maybe," Ethan said, "but I'd rather burn the empire than let you own it." Richard smiled thinly. "Then burn, boy. But understand, ashes don't rebuild." Back at the penthouse, Clara packed hurriedly, shoving what little they had into bags. Every creak of the floor made her jump. Every sound from the hallway sent her pulse racing. Then the elevator dinged. She froze. The doors slid open, and Marissa stepped out, her expression tense but urgent. "We need to move. Now!" Clara blinked. "You know." Marissa nodded. "Ethan told me everything. I traced Richard's men. He sent them here." Clara's stomach dropped. "To the children?" "Yes." Without another word, Clara grabbed Emma and Liam, clutching their hands as Marissa led them to a back exit. The corridors were narrow, unfamiliar, but Marissa moved fast. "Where's Ethan?" Clara demanded. "He's confronting Richard," Marissa said. "And if I know him, he won't stop until one of them is ruined." Clara's voice trembled. "He'll get himself killed." Marissa glanced over her shoulder. "Then you'd better give him a reason not to." At the office, the standoff had escalated. Richard stood now, face flushed with fury. "You think I'll let you drag my name through the mud? You're nothing without me, Ethan. You were a mistake I groomed into success." Ethan's calm cracked. "No, I was the son you never deserved." He reached for his phone, ready to release the files publicly, but Richard moved faster, snatching the device and smashing it against the desk. "You always were naive," Richard spat. "You think truth matters? The world doesn't care who's right. It only cares who wins." Ethan met his gaze, unflinching. Then I'll change the rules. Before Richard could respond, the door burst open. Clara stood there, breathless, the twins and Marissa just behind her. For the first time, Richard's mask slipped. You shouldn't be here, he hissed. Clara's voice was steady. Neither should you. Ethan turned toward her, stunned. Clara, she shook her head. You don't have to fight alone anymore. The tension in the room broke like glass. For a moment, no one moved. Then Ethan reached for her hand, steadying her, grounding himself. Richard's voice dripped with venom. You think standing here changes anything? Clara met his glare. No, but telling the world does. Marissa stepped forward, holding a second flash drive, identical to Ethan's. Already sent to the press, she said. You're finished. Richard's face drained of color. Ethan's voice was quiet but final. You ended this the day you tried to play God with my life. And for the first time in his life, Richard Cole was silent. The boardroom was cold, colder than the snowstorm raging outside. Ethan sat at the long mahogany table, a dozen pairs of eyes fixed on him. The cameras, the microphones, the polished glass walls. It all felt staged, a trial masquerading as procedure. At the head of the table sat Richard Cole, pristine in his tailored suit, hands folded neatly before him. His expression was the picture of calm control, the mask of a man who'd spent decades perfecting the art of deceit. Let's begin, Richard said smoothly. We are here to discuss the immediate suspension and potential removal of Ethan Cole as Chief Executive Officer of Cole Infrastructure, effective immediately. The words landed like gunfire. The board murmured in unease. Ethan remained still. Richard continued. In recent days, Mr. Cole has engaged in reckless and defamatory actions against this company and its leadership. His emotional instability has caused irreparable harm to our reputation and investor confidence. For the record, I move to vote him out of his position. Ethan stood slowly, the chair creaking behind him. You can stop pretending this is about the company, he said. This is about control. You manipulated financials, silenced whistleblowers, and destroyed anyone who got in your way, including my family. A sharp gasp cut through the room. Richard's lips curved. Wild accusations. You sound just like your mother when she thought there were people after her. Paranoia must run in the bloodline. Ethan stepped closer, placing a file on the table. This isn't paranoia. These are bank records, transfers from your offshore accounts to shell companies used to funnel money through the same clinic where Clara Evans gave birth 6 years ago. The board members exchanged stunned glances. Richard's composure wavered. Ethan pressed on. You didn't protect this company. You used it as your personal empire. And when I fell in love with someone you couldn't control, you erased her. You erased my family. Enough, Richard snapped, his calm veneer cracking. You have no proof. Ethan's voice was quiet but lethal. The federal investigators do. The room fell into chaos. Richard shot to his feet, shouting over the noise. You think you can destroy me with words? I built this place. Without me, you'd be nothing. Ethan met his gaze. Maybe, but at least I'll still have a soul. By evening, the news had broken. Cole Infrastructure CEO removed amid scandal. Richard Cole under federal investigation for fraud. The media storm was relentless. Analysts called it the fall of a dynasty. Stock tickers crashed. Commentators debated whether Ethan's act was brave or suicidal. Ethan didn't care. He had won the only battle that mattered. He stood in the quiet of his penthouse, the skyline flickering with police lights and snow. The empire that once defined him was crumbling, but for the first time, he didn't feel hollow. The door opened softly behind him. Clara stepped in, wrapped in her coat, her eyes searching his. I saw the news, she whispered. He turned to face her. It's done. Clara shook her head. It's never done with men like him. Ethan smiled faintly. You sound like Marissa. She's right, Clara said. Richard won't go quietly. You exposed him, but that only makes you his enemy now. He'll come for you. Ethan walked toward her, his expression calm but resolute. Let him. Clara's eyes filled with worry. Ethan, please. He reached out and took her hands. For 6 years, he owned my silence. Not anymore. I won't hide from him, and neither will you. Her voice broke. You think it's that simple? No, he said softly, but it's the truth. That night he sat beside the twins as they slept. The small rhythmic rise and fall of their breathing was the only sound in the room. He watched them for a long time, realizing he was seeing them not as symbols of what he'd lost, but of what he'd found. Liam stirred slightly, murmuring in his sleep. Ethan brushed a hand over his son's hair. My son. The words still felt unreal. He whispered, You'll never know the kind of man your great-uncle was. I'll make sure of it. From the doorway, Clara watched silently. Her heart twisted at the sight. The man she'd once loved, the one she'd fled to protect, now standing as the father her children had always needed. When he finally turned, she said quietly, They adore you. Ethan smiled, tired but genuine. I adore them. They don't know who you really are yet, she said. When they do, it'll change everything. Maybe, he said, but I want them to know the truth. All of it. I'm done pretending. The next morning, Marissa arrived with files and grim news. Richard's already making calls, she said. He's claiming you falsified the evidence. He's trying to spin the narrative, say you framed him out of jealousy. Ethan nodded, unsurprised. He's desperate. The feds won't buy it. They might not have to, Marissa said, but his allies on the board still have influence. He could drag this out for years. Ethan poured coffee into a mug, his movement steady. Then I'll outlast him. Marissa gave him a long, searching look. You're not doing this just for her anymore, are you? He shook his head. I'm doing it for them, he said, nodding toward the twins' room. Marissa smiled faintly. You sound like a man who finally knows what he's fighting for. Ethan looked out the window again, the snow easing into soft flurries. I do. Later, when the house was quiet again, Clara found him standing outside on the balcony, the wind tousling his hair. You should rest, she said. He turned to her, eyes distant but peaceful. I can't. Not yet. Clara stepped beside him, her coat brushing his arm. You've already done enough. He looked at her, his voice low. He took everything from us, Clara, but he also gave me something I never would have had without the loss. She frowned. What's that? He smiled faintly. A reason to start over. For a moment, neither spoke. The city glowed beneath them, quiet and bruised but still standing, just like them. And for the first time in 6 years, Ethan Cole didn't feel like a man running from ghosts. He felt like one who had finally turned to face them. Ethan didn't sleep that night. The victory that should have felt triumphant instead hung over him like a storm that refused to break. The city outside was quiet, but his mind was loud, haunted by memories, fears, and the lingering question of what came next. By dawn, he was standing on the balcony with a cup of coffee gone cold in his hand. Below, traffic was beginning to hum again, the city already moving past the scandal that had shattered his life. But he couldn't move on. Not yet. Behind him, the sliding door opened softly. Clara stepped out, her hair loosely tied back, her expression gentle but weary. She pulled her coat tighter around herself. You haven't been to bed, she said. I couldn't, he replied, staring out over the skyline. It feels like I just set fire to everything I built. Clara stepped beside him, the morning air biting at their faces. Sometimes the only way to build something real is to burn down what's false. He turned to her. And if there's nothing left after the fire? She smiled faintly. Then maybe that's the point. To start over. For a long moment, neither spoke. The world around them was still, caught between destruction and renewal. Later that morning, Marissa arrived, looking as though she hadn't slept either. Richard's under federal custody, she said. They found evidence of embezzlement, coercion, and multiple shell companies tied to blackmail payments. Ethan nodded. Good. But he's not going quietly, she continued. His lawyers are claiming the evidence was doctored by you. He's playing the victim card hard. Ethan gave a tired laugh. He always was good at rewriting the story. Marissa hesitated. He's also threatening to drag Clara into this. Says she was complicit in hiding the money. Clara stiffened, her face draining of color. What? Ethan's voice sharpened. That's a lie. Marissa nodded. Of course it is. But lies don't matter when the headlines bite first. He's desperate, trying to pull everyone down with him. Clara's hands trembled. He's not going to stop, is he? Ethan met her gaze, his own calm but fierce. He will, because I won't let him hurt you again. The hours that followed felt like a blur. Calls from lawyers, statements to the press, and flashes of cameras outside the building. It all blended into noise. Through it all, Clara stayed quiet, watching him with a mix of pride and fear. That evening, after Marissa left, Ethan found her sitting by the fireplace, staring at the flickering flames. The twins were asleep in the next room. He sat beside her, silence stretching comfortably between them. I keep thinking about that night in the park, she said finally. When you found us, I told myself it was an accident, that I sent that message by mistake. Ethan glanced at her. You still believe that? She shook her head slowly. No, I think part of me always knew it would reach you. He smiled faintly. Then I'm grateful for accidents. Her eyes glistened. You shouldn't be. If it hadn't been for me, you wouldn't have lost your company. I didn't lose it, he said softly. I traded it for something better. She frowned. What could possibly be better than what you had? He turned to her fully. The truth, and you. The words hung between them like the final piece of a puzzle falling into place. Clara looked away, her throat tight. You shouldn't say things like that. Why not? Because it makes it harder to leave. Ethan froze. Leave? Clara took a breath, steady but sad. You've done what you needed to do. Richard's gone. The story will die down eventually. But staying here, staying with you, it'll only keep it alive. The media won't stop watching. The twins don't deserve that. He reached for her hand. You don't have to run anymore. She met his gaze, her voice trembling. Running is the only thing I've ever been good at. He squeezed her hand gently. Then let me be good at stopping you. Clara laughed softly, tears glinting in her eyes. You don't give up, do you? Not when it comes to you. The next day, Richard's arrest dominated every channel. Footage of him being led in handcuffs through the courthouse steps played on repeat. The headlines screamed betrayal, corruption, and family collapse. Ethan turned off the television and exhaled deeply. It's over, he murmured. But when he turned, Clara wasn't there. Her coat was gone from the hanger. The twins' toys were missing from the living room. On the kitchen counter sat a folded note. He picked it up with shaking hands. Ethan, you gave me back my life, but now I need to learn how to live it on my own. Don't come looking for us. Not yet. The twins need peace, and so do I. Thank you for keeping your promise. Clara Ethan stood frozen, the letter trembling in his hand. The penthouse, once filled with laughter and light, now felt cavernous and hollow. He sank into the chair beside the window, staring out at the city. Snow was falling again, soft, steady, endless. He'd kept his promise. He'd saved them. But in doing so, he'd lost them again. And yet, as he sat there, a strange peace began to settle over him. This time, she hadn't left out of fear. She'd left out of choice. And for the first time in 6 years, that was something he could live with. Ethan drove for hours without direction, the city fading behind him like a chapter closing. The snow fell heavier the farther north he went, coating the windshield until the world looked almost blank, quiet, erased. He didn't know what he expected to find. Clara had left no address, no clue, nothing beyond that letter that now lived folded in his jacket pocket. He'd read it 100 times, each word cutting and comforting in equal measure. Don't come looking for us. Not yet. He told himself he wouldn't, but here he was anyway, following instinct more than reason. When the car's fuel light blinked, he pulled into a roadside diner somewhere along the Vermont border. The place was small, tucked between fir trees dusted in snow. Inside, the smell of coffee and old maple syrup hung in the air. He sat at the counter, the only customer. The waitress, a woman in her 60s, poured him a cup and smiled. Rough night? He gave a humorless chuckle. Rough few years. Ah, she said knowingly, setting down the pot. The long kind of trouble. He looked up at her, curious. The kind that don't end when you fix it, she said. Only when you stop blaming yourself. Ethan froze for a moment, her words striking something deep. And if it's too late for that? It's never too late for forgiveness, sweetheart, she said gently, even if it's your own. He stared into his coffee, the steam curling like ghosts of old memories. For the first time since Clara's disappearance, he realized how tired he truly was, how much of his life had been lived in battle mode. When he finally left, the snow had stopped. The clouds had broken, letting in slivers of sunlight that made the world sparkle like glass. Back in Boston, Marissa was holding the company together by threads. Ethan's departure had left a vacuum. Shareholders were panicking, the media kept circling, and Richard's legal team was still fighting to twist the story. She sat in her office, scrolling through articles, when her assistant rushed in. "You need to see this." The TV showed breaking news. Richard Cole hospitalized after collapse during court hearing. Marissa's blood ran cold. The reporter continued. Sources say Richard suffered a cardiac event following a heated exchange with prosecutors. He remains in critical condition. She picked up her phone and hesitated before calling Ethan. He deserved to know. But would he want to? The call came just as Ethan pulled into a rest stop, his phone vibrating against the dashboard. He hesitated before answering. "Marissa, you need to hear this from me," she said. "Richard's in the hospital. Heart failure. They don't think he'll make it through the night." Ethan was silent for a long time. The hum of the car engine was the only sound. Finally, he said, "Is that supposed to make me feel something?" "I don't know," Marissa said softly, "but maybe it's a chance to end this. For good." He hung up without replying. For a long while, he just sat there staring out at the snow-covered road. The man who had destroyed his family was dying, and all Ethan could feel was empty. He took the letter from his pocket again and unfolded it. The paper was creased and worn, but the words still carried warmth. "You gave me back my life." For the first time, he realized that maybe forgiveness wasn't about Richard. Maybe it was about freeing himself from the ghost that man had left behind. He started the car and turned back toward Boston. At the hospital, the air was thick with antiseptic and regret. Richard looked smaller than Ethan remembered, the tubes and monitors reducing him from a tyrant to a frail old man. When Ethan entered, Richard's eyes fluttered open. For a moment, neither spoke. "You came," Richard rasped. His voice was barely a whisper. Ethan stood at the foot of the bed. "You wanted to see me?" Richard managed a weak laugh. "Always thought you'd be the one in this bed first. You were reckless, emotional." Ethan said nothing. "I was trying to protect the family name," Richard continued. You were supposed to be better than me." Ethan's expression didn't soften. "You took everything from me, her, the children, 6 years of my life." Richard's breath hitched. "I built you. I made you strong." "You made me alone," Ethan said quietly. The old man's eyes flickered with something like remorse, or maybe just exhaustion. "Then don't die alone like I did," he whispered. "Find her. Make it right." The monitors beeped slower. Richard's gaze unfocused, then stilled. Ethan didn't move for a long time. Then he reached over, switched off the machine, and walked out without looking back. Outside, snow was falling again, soft and quiet. For the first time, the air didn't feel suffocating. It felt clean. He took out his phone and scrolled to the letter once more. His thumb hovered over the photo attached. The one detail he hadn't noticed before. A faint logo in the corner of the stationery. A small bed and breakfast name in Vermont. He smiled faintly, shaking his head. Clara had left him a breadcrumb after all. He looked out over the frozen city and whispered, "I'm coming home." Ethan arrived in Vermont just before dusk. The sky glowed in muted amber as snow blanketed the roadside, soft and endless. The small sign came into view. Maplewood Inn, cozy stays, warm hearts. He parked in front of the old wooden building, heart hammering against his ribs. A part of him feared what waited inside. Another locked door, another goodbye. But the faint warmth spilling from the windows pulled him forward. When he entered, a bell chimed. A woman at the front desk looked up from her book and smiled. "Welcome. Need a room for the night?" Ethan's voice came out quieter than he expected. "I'm looking for someone." "Most folks around here are," she said kindly. "Who?" He hesitated, then took out Clara's note. "Clara Evans. She might be here, with 2 children." The woman's smile faltered slightly. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded toward the stairs. "Room 3A, end of the hall." Ethan's chest tightened. Thank you. He climbed the stairs slowly, each step heavier than the last. He stopped in front of the door, his hand hovering over the wood. For a long time, he just stood there listening. Then faintly, laughter. Two small voices, Clara's voice soft and warm. He knocked once. The laughter stopped. Silence. Then footsteps. The door opened. Clara stood there, framed by the yellow glow of lamplight. Her expression shifted through shock, relief, and something like fear. Ethan! Clara, he said, breathless. You left without saying goodbye. She looked down. I had to. You didn't, he said gently. Not from me. The twins appeared behind her, eyes wide. Mommy, who's that? Liam asked. Clara knelt beside them. This is a friend. Ethan crouched to their level, his heart pounding. Hey, he said softly. You two remember me? Emma tilted her head. You made pancakes. He smiled. That's right. Liam grinned shyly. You made Mommy laugh. Clara's eyes glistened. Okay, you two, she said quietly. Back to your drawing. The children nodded and ran back to the small table, leaving Ethan and Clara alone by the doorway. They sat together after the twins went to bed. The room was small but cozy, fireplace crackling, wind sighing against the windows. Clara poured tea into two mismatched mugs. You shouldn't have come, she said softly. I had to, he replied. Richard's gone. Her hands stilled. Gone. He died last night, Ethan said. Heart failure. Clara stared into her cup. I don't know how to feel about that. Neither do I. They sat in silence for a while, the firelight dancing over their faces. Finally, Clara spoke. When I left, I wasn't running from you. I was running from what your world made me. He looked at her confused. I didn't belong in it, she continued. The luxury, the pressure, the headlines. It wasn't real. I didn't want our children to grow up thinking love depended on power. Ethan leaned forward. And what if I told you I left that world behind too? Clara's eyes met his. You'd be lying. He smiled faintly. Maybe a little, but I'm learning to live differently now. I'm starting over, from the ground up, and I want that ground to be wherever you are. Clara's breath caught. You don't mean that. I do, he said. The company's gone. The mansion's empty. The only thing that still feels real is sitting in this room, drinking cheap tea with you. She laughed softly, tears in her eyes. You're impossible. He reached across the table and took her hand. No, I'm just done pretending I can live without you. The wind outside howled harder, rattling the windows. Clara's gaze flicked toward the twins' room. They finally stopped asking if you were coming back, she whispered. Ethan swallowed. And what did you tell them? That sometimes people disappear because they're trying to find their way home. He smiled faintly. Then I guess I found mine. Her hand trembled in his. You don't know what you're asking, Ethan. Being with me means no cameras, no business dinners, no empire. Just life. Messy, ordinary, uncertain. He squeezed her hand. That's all I want. The fire crackled between them. Outside, the snow kept falling, steady and endless. After a long moment, Clara whispered, You really think we can start over? Ethan leaned forward, his voice soft but sure. We already have. She didn't answer, but when he reached up to brush a tear from her cheek, she didn't pull away. For the first time in years, the silence between them wasn't painful. It was peace. Later, when the fire burned low, Clara walked him to the door. You can stay the night, she said quietly. There's a spare room down the hall. He smiled, knowing it was more than hospitality. It was a step toward forgiveness. Thank you. As he turned to leave, she called softly, Ethan? He looked back. She hesitated, then said, You didn't just find us. You found yourself again. I hope you know that. He smiled, the kind that reached his eyes this time. I do now. And for the first time since that winter night in the park, the weight in his chest began to lift. The past had burned away, leaving something quiet, fragile, and real, like the dawn waiting just beyond the snow. The morning sun filtered softly through the frosted window panes of the Maplewood Inn, gilding the room in gold. The storm had finally passed. Snow lay thick and still outside, covering every scar the world had left behind. Ethan stood by the window, coffee in hand, watching the twins chase each other across the courtyard below. Their laughter carried faintly through the glass, light and free, the kind of sound that made everything else fade away. Behind him, Clara stirred, her voice still husky with sleep. "You're awake early." He turned, smiling. "Old habits. The world used to start with board meetings and phone calls. Now it starts with this." She walked to his side, wrapping her shawl around her shoulders. "This?" He nodded toward the window. "Them. You. Quiet mornings." Clara leaned her head lightly against his arm. "You're not going back, are you?" He shook his head. "No. The company's being restructured. Marissa's taking over. She'll make it something honest again. And you?" "I'm done chasing ghosts," he said softly. "I've got better things to build." Her eyes lifted to his, uncertain. "You sound like a man who's finally free." He exhaled, smiling faintly. "Maybe I am." By mid-morning, the inn's tiny lobby was alive with chatter. A group of locals had recognized Ethan from the headlines, though no one seemed brave enough to approach. They whispered instead, soft words like billionaire and fallen empire. But for once, he didn't flinch. He wasn't that man anymore. While Clara helped the twins pack snow into lopsided snowmen, he walked into the small front office. The innkeeper, the same kind-eyed woman from the night before, looked up with a grin. "Guess you found who you were looking for," she said. Ethan smiled. "I did." She studied him a moment, then said, "You planning to stay?" He hesitated. "For a while." "Well," she said, "I've got a property down the road for sale. Old place, needs fixing, big yard, good for kids. You strike me as someone who could use a new foundation." Ethan chuckled. "You have no idea." Later, Clara found him outside near the road, the snow glistening under a pale winter sun. "You disappeared," she teased. "I was talking to the innkeeper," he said. "There's a place for sale nearby. Thought it might be time to build something new." She raised an eyebrow. "Here." He nodded. "Why not? It's quiet, simple. The twins love it. You could paint again. Start over." Clara smiled, wistful but cautious. "You really mean it." "I've spent half my life building things that didn't matter," he said. "Now I want to build something that does." She studied him for a long moment, then took a slow step closer. "You're not the same man I met all those years ago." "I hope not," he said. Her smile softened. "No, you're better." He reached for her hand, and she didn't pull away this time. That evening, the four of them gathered near the fireplace in the common room. The twins sprawled across the floor, drawing on scraps of paper. Emma looked up and said, "Mommy, can he stay with us forever?" Clara froze, her eyes darting toward Ethan. He smiled and knelt beside them. "What do you think?" Liam grinned. "You make pancakes better than Mommy." "Hey," Clara said, feigning indignation. "Traitor." The laughter that followed was full and real, the sound of something healing. As the night wore on, Ethan felt the ache in his chest ease. The old ghosts, regret, guilt, loss, seemed to dissolve in the warmth of that small room. When the twins finally drifted off, Clara tucked them into bed, then returned to the firelight. "They adore you," she whispered. "I adore them," he replied. Her voice softened. "You know, they'll need stability, something lasting." Ethan nodded. "Then let's give it to them." She hesitated. "You really think we can make this work? After everything?" He looked at her, the flicker of firelight in his eyes. "We already are." Spring came slowly to Vermont. The snow melted from the hillsides and the ground turned soft and green again. On the edge of town, an old farmhouse began to change. New paint, repaired windows, laughter echoing through open doors. On the porch, Ethan knelt beside a wooden sign freshly carved by hand. "The Bench House." Clara stood behind him, wiping paint from her hands. "You named it after that night?" He smiled. "It's where everything began." She leaned down and kissed his temple. "Then it's perfect." In the yard, Emma and Liam chased each other through wildflowers, their laughter filling the air. For the first time, there were no cameras, no headlines, no shadows, just life. Ethan turned to Clara. "You know," he said quietly, "I used to think success meant never stopping. Now I think it's knowing when to stay. She smiled, threading her fingers through his. Then you finally made it. He squeezed her hand, watching the sun dip low over the trees. Yeah, he said softly. Home. The wind carried the sound of the children's laughter across the fields. And for the first time in years, Ethan didn't look back.